His name changed the world, not with creation but with destruction. This is not just a story, it's a descent into darkness. His name is known by all. Because of him, millions lost their lives. Cities were erased from the map, and the world was never the same again. Adolf Hitler remains one of the darkest and most terrifying figures in human history. But most of the time, we only talk about what's on the surface. A dictator, a tyrant, a monster. But what was behind the curtain? What did he truly believe? What twisted obsessions fueled the bloodshed? How did a young man who once dreamed of becoming an artist become a tyrant with absolute power? Today, we step inside the mind of Adolf Hitler, not to sympathize, but to understand the roots of evil itself. Because to truly understand history, we must also confront its darkest shadows. Here on Mystic Archives, we uncover the untold truths, not just the events, but the obsessions, the fears, and the betrayals that made them possible. This is not a tribute. This is a warning, written in blood, across the pages of history. If you're the kind of person who looks beyond the surface, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now, because the truth we're about to reveal might shake you more than you expect. When people hear the name Hitler, they think of war, blood, destruction, but very few ever look back to where it all began. His childhood. Adolf Hitler was born on the 20th of April, 1889, in a small town in Austria. His father, Alois, was strict, controlling, obsessed with discipline. His mother, Clara, was soft, protective, to escape the tension at home. Young Adolf found peace in drawing. He would spend hours sketching, reading, retreating into his imagination. What many don't know is that Hitler's greatest dream was to become an artist. He was especially drawn to architecture and landscapes, filling notebook after notebook with drawings. In 1907, with his mother's support, he applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, but his application was rejected. Not once, but twice. They told him he had no talent. Not long after, his mother died. He was left alone. No parents, no future, and a crushed dream. He wandered the streets of Vienna, poor, isolated. And during these years, something began to change. The light of art faded, and in its place grew silence, bitterness, resentment. In letters from that time, Hitler described how the rejection broke him. He felt like a nobody, forgotten, invisible, and maybe that was the first step that changed the course of history. If he had been accepted into that art school, perhaps the world would have known him as an artist, not as a tyrant. But fate chose a different path, one that led straight into the heart of darkness. When World War I began in 1914, Hitler didn't see it as a tragedy. He saw it as an opportunity. He volunteered for the German army and was sent to the front lines. Years in the trenches left him scarred, physically and mentally. He witnessed fear, hunger, death up close. And somewhere in that chaos, he began to see not just enemy nations, but enemy people. He was awarded medals for bravery. But what marked him the most was Germany's defeat. To Hitler, it wasn't just a military loss. It was a betrayal from within. And that belief became the foundation of everything he would later build. These years planted seeds of hatred, obsession, and the hunger for power. He was no longer just a soldier. He was becoming someone who believed he had a mission. For most people, the war was the end. For him, it was just the beginning. After the war, Germany was in ruins. The economy had collapsed. People were desperate. And in that void, someone like Hitler found the perfect stage. But it wasn't just his rage that made him dangerous. It was his voice. He knew how to speak, how to ignite anger, how to hypnotize a crowd. These weren't just speeches. Every gesture, every pause, every glare was carefully rehearsed. He used simple, powerful phrases, targeting traitors, Jews, and those who had stabbed Germany in the back. And slowly, people stopped seeing him as just a man. They started seeing him as a savior. He didn't speak to minds. He spoke to emotions. He took fear, shame, and pain and turned them into weapons. With music, flags, uniforms, massive rallies, he built a language of symbols and spectacle. The Nazi emblem, the salutes, the perfectly staged events, all part of a calculated manipulation. Propaganda became his greatest weapon. He didn't pull a trigger, he pulled at people's minds. And the most terrifying part, they welcomed it. They applauded it. Hitler wasn't just a political leader. He was a man driven by strange obsessive beliefs. At the heart of Nazi ideology wasn't just racism. There was mysticism, myth, and the occult. He believed in the supremacy of the so-called Aryan race, a pure bloodline untouched by time or corruption. To him, their mission was to protect this race and restore it to global dominance. But these weren't just ideas. Nazi officers were sent across the world, from Tibet to ancient Roman ruins, hunting for traces of lost civilizations and racial origins. Some even searched for Atlantis, convinced it was the ancient home of the Aryans. Inside Hitler's inner circle, decisions were influenced by rituals, symbols, even astrological charts. He saw himself as chosen by destiny, not guided by science, but by myth. Even the swastika on the Nazi flag was rooted in ancient mysticism. He was no longer just a dictator. He was a fanatic, building a world shaped by obsession and preparing it for ruin. Eva Braun. Her name is barely mentioned in history books, but she was the quiet witness to Adolf Hitler's private world. She met him when she was young, and for years she remained in the shadows. No public appearances, no influence, no recognition. To the world, she didn't exist, but behind closed doors, she saw everything. Did Hitler love her? Maybe. But one thing is certain. Her life was completely controlled. He kept her away from politics, hidden from the public eye. Eva wasn't a partner. She was a presence, a ghost in the background. And yet, she stayed until the very end. In 1945, as Berlin burned above them, Eva followed Hitler into the bunker. There, as the world collapsed outside, they got married, and just hours later, they died together. Eva swallowed cyanide. Hitler shot himself in the head. Eva Braun's story isn't about love. It's about surrender, a life quietly devoted to a man consumed by obsession. And that silence became the final scene in one of history's darkest tragedies. On the 30th of April 1945, it was announced that Adolf Hitler had committed suicide. His body alongside Eva Braun's was burned. Nazi officers claimed to have found the remains. They testified. But that's where the real mystery begins, because many didn't believe it was truly dead. The body was never fully identified. The Soviets kept fragments of his teeth, but full confirmation didn't come for decades. And in the silence, rumors began to grow. Some claimed Hitler escaped to Argentina. Others believed he built a new life in South America, or hid in secret Nazi bunkers. Even declassified CIA and Soviet files included conflicting reports. Over the years, people claimed to have seen him alive, in hiding. The truth is, even in death, Hitler remained a shadow, and that uncertainty didn't erase his legacy. It made it stronger. Because you can kill a man, but legends, especially dark ones, are much harder to bury. Adolf Hitler's private life was as complex as his public persona. To the world, he was a dictator, a mass murderer. But behind closed doors, the picture was strangely different. He was a vegetarian. He claimed to be disgusted by meat and banned it from being cooked around him. He showed concern for animals. Some reports say he opposed animal experiments. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He spent much of his time reading. He even had a deep affection for dogs and cats, mentioned in multiple eyewitness accounts. And this is where the most disturbing contradiction begins. On one side, a man who preached compassion for animals. On the other, the architect of genocide, torture, and death camps. How can one person care for life in one form and destroy it so completely in another? This was one of Hitler's most unsettling traits. A surface that seemed controlled, even disciplined, masking a mind in complete moral collapse. What looked like a strict lifestyle was in truth a carefully built illusion, a cover for something far more terrifying. Here's the biggest question. How did someone like Hitler convince millions? How did ordinary people come to believe him, fight for him, even kill for him? The answer lies in psychology. Hitler wasn't just a political leader. He was a master manipulator of the masses. He took a desperate nation and fed it simple, powerful messages. He created enemies. He pointed to scapegoats. But most importantly, he offered something deeper. Belonging. You're not alone, he said. Together, we will rise again. He organized anger. Every speech, every rally, every poster was part of a plan. He didn't teach people to think. He told them to believe. And for a broken, exhausted population, it wasn't just an answer. It felt like salvation. And history shows, if people are scared enough, hopeless enough, and desperate for a strong voice, even the most dangerous ideas can earn a standing ovation. Hitler's greatest weapon wasn't tanks. It was the human mind and its deepest fears. Hitler didn't just dream of ruling for a term. He envisioned an empire that would last 1,000 years. Nazi propaganda called it the Third Reich. the final and greatest continuation of Germany's past empires. But this wasn't just political ambition. It was an obsession with absolute control. He reshaped the entire state to serve one purpose: his will. The party, the army, the education system, the media, all bound to one man. He allowed no opposition. Those who questioned him were silenced, arrested, or simply disappeared. To Hitler, leadership didn't mean responsibility. It meant total obedience. And here's the darkest part. This regime was built with public support. He rose through elections and then erased democracy entirely. His 1,000-year Reich lasted only 12 years, but the destruction it left behind left scars that may never fully heal. Adolf Hitler is dead, but the pain he caused, the ideas he spread, and the scars he left still remain. This is not just the story of one man's fall. It's the story of how a society closed its eyes and paid the price. Hitler was a monster, but monsters don't appear overnight. He was created by silence, by fear, by people looking the other way, and perhaps most dangerously, by the human desire to believe. Even today, there are places in the world where his ideas are whispered with admiration. That's why it's not enough to remember. We must understand, because if we don't, history has a cruel way of repeating itself. If you want to keep exploring the dark corners of history, the truths that were never told, subscribe. Here on Mystic Archives, we don't just tell the past, we question it.